All right, so I tell you what, shall we like alleviate some of the tension in the room by bringing in a fan take? Because I've got a fun one for you, Katan. It's mainly you I want to hear this from. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say the take initially, and then I'm going to give you some reasons, right? But you can tell me, do you want to just go wild on the take first, or shall I give you some of the reasons? So the take, just listen, the opening gambit, you know, like that show Porn Stars, like best I can do is this. Yes. Right, the opening gambit is, the Astralis era was fraudulent. Their success was primarily due to a weak scene throughout. Shall I give you some reasons? This isn't my take. This is a fan take. It's by someone called Alex. Do you want to hear the take? Right. So his actual take. By the way, this is a hell of a hot take. The hot take that the Astralis era is fraudulent is a hell of a take. So he says, point one, the Magisk move was forced on them after Kjaerbye joined North. They would have continued without a roster move. So he's basically saying that was accidental. Then he says the scene was weak at the time of the move. Several rosters were past their prime. FaZe after they lost Boston final. SK were number 2 despite being past their prime. C9's Boston major lineup, I assume he means because it broke up later on. Mouse Sports led by Chris J at the time. Na'Vi lineup that had Flamey and Edward did not become a top team until roster moves. Liquid with Steel. Technically, they did have the Brazilian Steel there briefly, if you remember. G2 and Fnatic's French and Swedish rosters. I won't do all the reasons because it's actually quite long. I'll go quickly. Then he says, like, a large portion of the Astralis era overlapped with the Krieg and Org meta, which reduced the skill gap significantly. Then he says that he thinks the best teams of their era weren't particularly impressive, like FaZe Clan was changing their 5th player, SK and MIBR was declining, and then it had the Americans. Na'Vi didn't achieve much until they made roster moves. Liquid only won the Grand Slam while Astralis wasn't present. Technically not true, but people always say it. EG, NRG, and 100 Thieves were notable teams. I like the way he actually says that on a Kazad show. Like, and then there's just shit teams like that 100 Thieves squad or whatever. Like, that was the team he coached, you lunatic. He was in the semis of that major. He's not going to say they were all shit with it anyway. I'll quickly go through. Then he goes, the major finals win. So he's doing the NBA thing where you only look at the finals. In the finals, they only beat Na'Vi, Ents, and Avangar. So he has like criticisms for Ents and Avangar, for example. And then he says, what ended the Astralis... Here's the bang. He even ended on this note. By the way, this in itself could have been a hot take. It's mental, though. He goes, what ended the Astralis era was COVID, not another top team beating them. We didn't get to see the 5-man lineup play another major after 2019. He's even doing, Maui, the fucking Score Esports angle of like, do we really know the Astralis era ended? Did it ever end? Like, so I want to get your takes. Listen, I'll give this guy credit, Maui. He has put his balls on the table. So what do you think of this take? It's a crazy take. So what do you think? Where are you going on this one?
I mean, I would just take it like this. I feel like every time we have era discussions or like how strong an era is in Counter-Strike, I feel like I always have to bring up the same points, is that we usually, and what's surprising is that this guy's going retroactively, but usually when you're in the moment, you're hyper aware of all the flaws of teams that are near the top, and so it's easier to discredit them. Like right now, for example, you look at the top teams with the exception of Vitality, and you say, oh, it's easy era for Vitality. Like Spirit's flawed. Like they have only 2 really good players. The other 3 are just like bums. Without Donk, they would be nothing. Without Mouse, we all know they're chokers. Aurora, we all know in playoffs, they just like are 50% of themselves. Like Na'Vi, they have no star player. G2, they got snacks calling. Like it's really, really easy to do that all the time, to pick holes in every team that's not number 1 in the world. And the same goes with Astralis back then, except the team that was nipping on their heels was a Liquid team that was actually a Grand Slam winning team and was probably also one of the highest firepower lineups of all time. So giving credence to Astralis' era is actually pretty easy, because you just look at the number 2 team and you say, that was already a really good team. You had Simple damn near the apex of his powers there around like 2019, 2018. Yep. And then even looking at the FaZe team that was kind of near the top, like they did have a revolving door of a 5th, which was the concerning part. But in terms of like the core of Nico, Guardian, Rain, Olafmeister, that was pretty damn good. Okay, like that was a team that made it to the major grand finals. Beyond that, I think there is room for hesitation, and but like I don't think that it gets that bad. Like I think in fact some of those lineups I think about them pretty favorably. Do I know that they have flaws? Yeah, like if the number 4 team in the world at that time was FaZe with like a Dren or Neo, or I don't know, they swapped around a couple people at that time, then sure, I'm going to be a little bit hesitant to say this is the most competitive era in 2018, 2019. But on top of that, like what makes the team interesting at world number 1 and like why it's fun to compare eras is if the number 1 team in the world has a reason that like there's no strong weaknesses, then it's going to indicate that there is a that there was a reason that they were number one. I mean, that seems kind of recursive in discussion, but like it's just like you have one of the greatest clutchers of all time in Zipnix as your support player. You have a Glaive who is also one of the best fragging in-game leaders. He was so sneaky himself around smokes. And then the core of Dupree, Device, Magisk, I don't really think I even need to explain that. Like when they were at the peak of their powers, that was just an unbelievably strong trio. And I feel like the only way that this discussion gets kind of muddied is like the wrinkle that Vu brought in is like, was this just a super team? Like, was this just the first extremely effective super team that Astralis were? Because when they were formed, like Magisk basically was the best Danish player not on Astralis when they got him on the team. And in many ways, this should have just kind of been a side grade for Kirby major MVP. But in reality, it actually made them the best team ever. I don't know. I think this takes pretty bad because, like, if you look back every 4 years and look at the gameplay, which I have done over many eras, it will look worse. Like, watching the teams that played against Astralis at that time, like, if you watch, say, the semifinals Navi versus Ents, where Simple chokes that one versus, what was it, Ariel or X7, like, on Mirage Triple, it's like, you watch the whole thing back, and it's a little bit disappointing watching how they're wanting to construct around. Like, it feels like they're not going through all the steps that a modern team would do it. But but like, it's still about playing within your era and showing that you're a cut above in that era, which is what NIP did in 2012 and 2013. It's what Fnatic were doing in the 2014 roughly era time. It's what LGSK did in 2015, 2016. And then moving on from that, I guess there was like a little bit of a gap in 2017 for me, but like 2018, 19, Astralis was just unbelievable. They were just so good.
What do you think, Kassad?
I think this guy is like embarrassing our name that we share, like Alexander.
Another take we should be
He should fucking change his name before he. Like...
Everyone who's called Alex is really letting this show down this episode, so I've discovered it. Okay, fair enough, all right. I didn't thought that angle. Okay. Yeah.
But the thing is, like, to say something like that is extremely, like, I don't want to say stupid, but like not very well thought through, right? Because that person, whoever that guy is, that he sent that take, obviously didn't watch the demos of the Astralis team from 2017, 18, and 19. Because if you compare the teamwork there, it's not even comparable to teams today. Nobody since or before that had a teamwork like Astralis did. I felt like when you were playing against them, I had a misfortune or a fortune to play against them in their peak multiple times, and it feels like they know what you're gonna do even before you do it. They feel ready for any different scenario. There is a flash always coming. There is a smoke, always extra smoke, somehow on the spot, exactly where you are just gonna attack. There is a extra guy there, which is obviously Zipnix, you know, it's not just the clutching, it's the rotations, it's the positioning, it's the glaives calling, and on top of everything, they didn't have a superstar. Yes, Device was one of the top oppers, but they didn't have a superstar. Nico was a superstar, Simple was a superstar. Before that, it was what? Olaf. Before that, it was Kenny or Guardia. I don't even know. It doesn't really matter. But the point is, like, Astralis didn't have a superstar. They were a team, the perfectly built team. Perfect pieces in a perfect spot, right? Saying accidentally Magus came into their fucking, he tripped and then landed on a fucking server? On TeamSpeak, no, he got there, he got a shot, and he fucking delivered, right? In those years. The amount, the level they played on those 3 years has never been seen before. The teams around them, yeah, it was FaZe, it was Navi, with like Maui said, with Simple being one of his like best years, 2017, 18, and 19, and still managed to do absolutely nothing. It's crazy to say that Astralis was a fraudulent era, right? It just makes no sense at all. Just take a look at it. Has any team outside of that Astralis and the small portion of that Navi lineup with Boomage, Simple, Beat, Perfecto, and who was the fifth one? Fuck, I can't remember. Electronic, yeah. Was there any team that came close to having a real fucking era like Astralis did, like Fnatic did, like, SKM ABR did, or NIP in 2013-14? Has any team accomplished that? Not a single team. So the competitiveness of that era was the highest we ever had in CSGO/CS2. Nothing since then has been remotely close, and Astralis was dominating that era by a big margin. Like nobody was close. The closest team to them was that Liquid 2019, which they didn't get to play too much against each other because we all know those reasons. But when it came to the major, like look at the major in Berlin 2019, for example, right? The ones they played against Avangard, who defeated us in the semis. They defeated, who did they play? NRG in the quarters. I can't remember, maybe Vitality in the semis. No, Vitality lost to Avangard. They played in the semis against...
It was Liquid in the quarters, and the semis was NRG. And
yes, Liquid in the quarters, semis in the NRG. Yeah. Yes. So that was not a weak playoff run. Outside of the finals, Avangard had like a Cinderella run, but NRG and Liquid in the playoffs, 2 out of 3 games, that's a solid run.
Yeah.
Not like, for example, Vitality in Paris or some shit like that with Into the Breach, Apex, and Gamer Legion, right? The CCT playoff. So, saying that it was fraudulent, like, I like the fact that he brought reasons that he thinks they're like, they're there. Yeah, he did his work, some of the work, even though it was throwing rocks from one place to another, just pointless, right? Just fucking nothing.
I just think the term fraudulent is being sort of thrown around a little bit in a weird way lately. Like, for example, like, I said the last time I used fraudulent, or I guess fraud watch, was like, I said, for example, Zonic should be on fraud watch, but that's different from being a fraud. Fraud watch is kind of a fun way to say, like, let's make sure that this person isn't just completely check stealing. But saying fraudulent when you win, it's like, how could you possibly say four majors is fraudulent? Like, it's just
having a most dominant era of Counter-Strike by a single team without a superstar. I understand his whole point was about like the competition was not that difficult, but which is not true. It's simply not true. When you have Nico in his fucking prime, Simple in his fucking prime in FaZe, and a bunch of other teams that can actually, like NRG was more than a solid team back in that in that era. Team that didn't lose to anyone except for the teams like Astralis and Liquid. Like you had Mouse, who was he mentioned Chris J. Chris J wasn't a bad player. Like he was delivering in big games a lot.
Yeah.
Mouse was a good team back then, so it's just saying something like that is stupid that he should change his name to like Maui, maybe.
The problem with this take, I agree with a lot of what you said, by the way. I actually do think this take is absolute ass. Like, it's actually one of the worst takes almost possible to create, because what he's done is take the best team ever and try and make it sound like as though we were all just like imagining that they were this amazing cassette. I'll start where you started there. I actually do think the giveaway, in my opinion, about this post is, even though I agree with the cassette, he gave a lot of reasons. You notice those reasons sound like someone who didn't watch Astralis play, though. They sound like someone who's looked upon the Wikipedia, because you're right, Kassad, if you look at the things he's listed as reasons, he just takes it for granted. Like, for example, like the Chris J one's a great remark, mate. When he just says Mouse Sports, led by Chris J at the time, he just leaves it there, because what he's doing, as far as I can tell, is he's thinking, well, Chris J's irrelevant now, and he was never an all-time great IGL, so that he must have been shit. Weird. That's it. That's like you looked it up on Wikipedia, dude, because here's why that's a really bad take. Anyone who watched that team knows that the brilliance of that team was it wasn't a super tactical team. They obviously just had Chris J call the strats, but then people like Sonny obviously fucking did stuff in the team, like the secondary caller. They had like a bot, like Rops was in that team. They had some pretty smart players, and they kind of played like their international team. They played like poor man's FaZe. They were like a loose international squad. And yes, Chris J wasn't Carrigan, but mate, they were beating like Peak, Simple, etc. Simple and Electronic were on that Na'Vi team they were losing to. They were beating Virtus Pro and FaZe themselves. So the weird thing about that is that sounds like you're using, like you've done a great job on Wikipedia trying to find quick reasons why, but I'll go with what Kassad said. The most obvious rebuttal here is just the eye test, my dude. That is eye test the best team to ever play Counter-Strike. And by the way, I'm not even saying for CSGO. All of CS. I've watched every version of CS. There was some really good tactical teams like MTW and Zonic back in 1.6. They were on this level, mate. Like, they were like a bit ahead of their opponents, and that was impressive at the time. Not only did this eye test-wise, the way the strats flowed together were unbelievable, the mid-rounds that they would make in this team. But then also, if you actually do know, like people like Maui and Kassad do when they watch the demos, if you actually actually know their meta of the era, they also they weren't just ahead at the beginning, guys. I always say this, the most underrated thing about Astralis is almost the entire era they were ahead of everyone tactically. No one ever caught up. Like, let's say, by the way, I can tell you, even the people in Team Liquid, like Zeus and those in the first year, that 2018, they even look back themselves and go, maybe we took the wrong approach because we tried to copy what they were doing. We thought, like, if it's like the same things, by the way, they didn't think, like, look, they've got all simple and that we can't beat them. They were launching like, wait a minute, what if we just do this? What will work for us? It never did. I'll give you the best example, in my opinion, ever, that Astralis just was the truth tactically. It's when they would do that thing where they would win all those Nuke T-sides, when Nuke was super CT-sided. And you know when they would do like a million variations of that smoke pop in the vent cassade, where Glaive would just go straight down. That looks easy if you're a noob. That is so fucking hard to make work the way they did, mate. Like, loads of teams tried. In fact, every team scouted this even and tried like different nade combos and spamming. They would still do it all the time, and you just couldn't stop them winning. Like, I actually think this is a terrible take, because like eye test wise already it doesn't work. And then even if I won't go through all the reasons because he gave a million, but basically these reasons are an example of what I don't like about how people do analysis, which is he's actually giving all those teams there sucking. But it's like one of the main reasons those teams sucked is because of Astralis, though. Like, I'll give you the obvious quick one, which is in 2019, he himself agreed that Liquid only won because Astralis wasn't there. By the way, that's not even true. There was 2 tournaments Astralis attended that Liquid won. There was Pro League and there was the IM Cologne, ESL1 Cologne. But even so, think about the logic of what you're saying. So the moment Astralis, by your logic, stop attending events, a different team with all-time great players shit on the whole scene. That means there's at least one other good team in the fucking scene, doesn't it? The one that won the 23 matches in a row, that's pretty fucking good. So that one already is kind of whack. Here's what's funny. I don't hate the take from this premise, guys. If what he's saying instead is, right, I agree with you, Maui, get fraudulent, the word, out of here. Zonic is in no sense a fraudulent coach. You can say you think Zonic was fraudulent in how he coached Falcons. Now we're having a conversation. But how were you guys? Nobody who won 5 majors with different players was a fraud. Like, that doesn't even make sense. It'd have to be the craziest conspiracy ever, where everyone pretended this guy was a coach and he was never doing any of it. In which case, by the way, the obvious question is who was? Because spoiler, Glaive wasn't on Vitality. I don't know if you guys did or didn't see that one. Like, by the way, they won a major without Magisk. So to me, the idea justifies shooting people with the order. That doesn't make you win all the majors, mate. Come on, let's not be serious.
There is that question, like, that nobody asks, but it's there. Like, how much credit do you get actually, and how much work did you do actually?
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Like, let's say Zonic, he won 4 or 5 majors, right? 5, but let's say 4 with Astralis with that lineup, right? And he got all that credit, and he got like considered as the GOAT, and like, yeah, that's fine. But then always there is a question like how much we didn't get any insights in anything,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, in football, in sports, you exactly know what the manager is doing. Like, you know what the coach is doing. When you look at the Premier League, you know exactly what they are doing, right? Like Arteta, like Pep, and the Klopp, and all these others, right? But in CS, it's not like that. You have these coaches that are there to kind of rally the troops, or have a moral impact on the team, but they are not really engaged in any kind of strategical, like, development of the team or anything in game, or and then how much credit does that person deserve for winning the major? Does it get the same one as, for example, Blade, who is doing bunch of things technically? Like, it's just a different type of, sport as well. Right? It's not the same, and especially when we don't have these insights in what people are doing. But it leads me. It's good that we start talking about the coaches, because
I've got one last thing to wrap up. Let me just quickly wrap this point. So all I will say finally is this: 2 things. One, the 3 quick points. One, I actually think the point you made about the Krieg and Augment, which is true, by the way, that was actually during like 2019, coming into like 2020. With but what I don't get about that take is I would go the other way, dude. I actually think the Krieg and Augment is why teams like Ents were able to get close to Astralis. Like, I don't think the Ents roster had any business being in the server with them. But the point is, if you do a good CT setup with 2 Augs, you can kill someone in a way you wouldn't have with 2 M4A4s against like AKs. So I actually think that's a weird argument, because to me, I actually think those weapons leveled up the scene.
I think,
like, it should make it harder to be dominant, in my opinion, if your opponent has those guns. It makes everyone good.
Exactly. It made things harder for them rather than easier. We, Renegade /100 teams, were better because of Krieg and Og for about 10 to 15%.
Of course.
And we were aware of that. It's not like we were like
No.
living this fucking crazy world where we're like, yeah, it's because we are so good. No, because the meta was so,
Yes.
oriented towards Krieg and Orc that people loved using it. And you have sharp people, skilled people that knows how to use an imbalanced gun, and it leveled up your skill and your performance for 10 to 15%. And as I remember in Astralis, who was the one who was actually using Krieg?
Mainly Magus. Yeah, it's mainly Magus.
Magus? Yeah. But anyway,
and he was already more of a specialist anyway. By the way, one last point I would make as well as this. The other reason why I think this take isn't very good about the rest of the scene being weak is you could actually, Kassad, have done that argument about the Na'vi with like Perfecto and Boomich, etc., because they had Simple as well. Bro, Simple and Zimu were in their peak at this era, contending like Messi and Ronaldo for #1 in the world, and Astralis was winning all the tournaments. Like, that's pretty fucking good. Anyone saying, yeah, but like he said there, like, yeah, but their roster wasn't as good. Like, he had Flamey and Edward. Bro, there's plenty of people played them with Flamey Edward and couldn't beat Simple at that time, mate. He was unbelievably cracked out. Like, and the idea that like you aren't good and you're like accidentally beating Simple even with Flamey and Edward, bro, he would have got a few more of those championships if your team wasn't that good. So
no,
anyway,
I think
I would say the last thing is this. I don't hate it from the concept that like one thing he did make a good point about is we shouldn't just take the greatest teams of all time and say they were good at everything and there's no context to add. He is right. You can do things like, by the way, there's actually an even better angle he didn't even think to do, which is right around the time they started this era, Valve took out Cobblestone, their permaban, and then they got to switch their permaban. In fact, it happened like twice. That's a better argument, but even then, you still have to win the game. So what I would say is this. I don't hate the idea of, like you said about Zonic, by the way, let's reevaluate the context of people's wins and their success. That's a great... that topic's a good one. That's why it was actually not a bad take to talk about. I just don't agree with... I don't agree with the conclusion. The conclusion is ass.
No.
The idea that they were fake is ass. And how about you as well? Fraudulent is going too far now. Like, Simple can never be a fraud. By the way, Zimu can never be a fraud. They could be a fraud in 1 year or in one tournament or they're overrated. But these people their careers scream they're bona fide,
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's just the debate is nice to have. Like, this is a good subject for debating, and props to that guy for saying that, right?
So come on, then, Kassad, what coaching take have we got now? Come on.
The closure was good, but also one more point on the previous one. You kind of agree with you 100% when you said you have Messi and Ronaldo in Real Madrid and Barcelona, and they're living Champions League left, right, and meanwhile we have Nico and Simple peak, like, Messi and Ronaldo, and then Astralis winning all the events. Like, it just doesn't fucking make sense.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.